Welcome to Inspire Campfire, a podcast where ordinary people tell their stories of extraordinary adventure. These are campfire stories meant to inspire the rest of us to light the fire within, get outside, follow our dreams, and return to tell our own stories. Ready? Let's strike the match.
Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Scott Wurzbacher, and today we're talking with someone who epitomizes the work hard, play hard mindset and is here to share with us how confidence comes through the grit of experience. We're joined by Anita Phillips, who has oscillated between the glitzy corporate life of London, Paris, and Hong Kong, where she was a lawyer for 20 years, to traveling the world multiple times with little more than a backpack and a small tent. Now an executive coach, she lives in the foothills of Mont-Blanc in the French Alps with her husband, 2 daughters, 2 cats, and chickens. Anita recently completed the Super Bowl of trail races, the Ultra-Trail du Mont-Blanc, involving 176 kilometers of arduous trails through the French, Italian, and Swiss Alps with a staggering 10,000 meters of vertical elevation. Anita's 48, new to trail running, and had only a handful of races under her belt, yet was a top 10 finisher in her age group. She firmly believes anything is possible and that we're all capable of reinvention with sufficient self-belief, time, strategic planning, and support. I am so excited to share this story with you. Anita, welcome to the campfire.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks for having me.
Oh my gosh, what a journey it's been. And this is just a story that, on the surface, it sounds amazing enough just to hear about your ultra marathon at Tour de Mont Blanc. But, as you dig and the story just goes deeper and deeper, and it's truly inspiring. I think I would love if we could just start with the UTMB and talk about that experience, and then we can go back in time from there. But Anita, could you tell for listeners that aren't familiar, can you talk about the UTMB and what it is?
Sure. So I think you described it as the Super Bowl of trail races. It is the biggest race on the trail running circuit, and it happens to take place just outside my front door, actually. So it starts in Chamonix, it ends in Chamonix, and it follows this amazing route all around Mont Blanc. So at every point, you have got Mont Blanc on your left. And if you don't, you've gone wrong. But it goes through the French Alps. It then goes through the Italian Alps, and it twists round to the Swiss Alps and comes back to Chamonix, back into France at the end. It is a long race, shall we say. It starts at 6 p.m. in Chamonix, and that means you go straight into one night and then the next day. And then the really tough bit is the second night. And the vertical elevation is tough. The altitude is tough. The terrain is challenging. Nutrition is difficult because you're obviously on the go all that time. So you've got to try and take in enough food to keep going, but without making you feel too sick. But it was an amazing experience. It's quite a prestigious race in that you need to qualify. I was lucky enough to get enough points to qualify just. I certainly felt like I was probably one of the least qualified people there, but I thought, okay, I've got to give it a go. I'm really lucky to qualify. It has a high dropout rate, so about 36% dropped out this year. 2,760 odd started, over 1,000 dropped out. And that can be for various reasons. It can be because of the challenge of the course, or it can be that the runner is still going, but they miss a time cutoff point. There are various checkpoints across the route, and you have to get in within a cutoff. So that can be another reason why people don't finish.
Wow. Okay. So you start at 6 p.m. and sorry, you might have said this already, but how much time do you have? Like, what's the cutoff time? How much time do you have to finish?
Yeah, sure. The cutoff time is 46.5 hours. So you need to be back in Chamonix within 46.5 hours. Because I'm new to trail running, was thinking I'm just going to try and finish the thing, just to finish it and not drop out would be an achievement. I actually came in after 40 hours and 12 minutes. So it was a nice time to arrive. It was the Sunday morning. Lots of people were out to see me cross the finishing line. It was amazing.
That's amazing. And top 10 in your age group.
Yeah, I somehow just sneaked in. I kept making up some ground towards the end. I think I was just so determined to finish. I actually found some energy from somewhere. I hadn't really been able to eat or drink anything for a long time. I had a lot of heartburn by that point from all the gels and bars I think I'd consumed. But yeah, something clicked, and I just ran. I just went, I felt fast, but I don't know how fast it was. As I turned into the square in Chamonix, it was an amazing moment to see my two daughters and my nieces waiting in the sidelines to sort of whisk me up. And they really brought me in sprinting, because they just pulled me, and we ran really fast across the finishing line. It was great.
It's incredible. So 176 kilometers, 40 hours and 12 minutes. So I'm really curious, because I've had some other guests on the podcast before that have done the hiking Tour de Mont Blanc. And I think, they take 10 days or something to do it. They're hiking 10, 15 miles a day and then staying in nice accommodations at night. A very, very different experience. I'm just curious, like, as you kind of contrast this, and by the way, the Tour de Mont Blanc, the hiking, the extended version, not the one that you did, is something that's high on my bucket list. Something that I'm hoping to do someday. But I guess I'm just curious, like, what is it like to do it in such a short period of time? And as compared to people that go and they do this as a 10-day hike, and I'd love to hear just some of the highlights for you.
Yeah, so as part of my training, I actually did it over 4 days with my husband in the middle of July. And he had previously done it the summer before with his sister over 10 days. So the traditional hiking pace and route. And what we wanted to do over 4 days was to try and link the whole of the race course together. So starting from the church in Chamonix and finishing back in Chamonix. And we stopped in 3 refuges along the way. And that was quite a challenge, certainly for my husband. He's very sporty, but he definitely thought that was a thing. He said to me I needed to finish that feeling pretty fresh. Otherwise, I wouldn't stand a hope in hell of being able to do it 6 weeks later in one go. I have to say, I really enjoyed doing it in 4 days, because we got to have a meal in the evening, sleep at night, and then have a breakfast, early in the morning before setting off. It was still 45 to 50 kilometers, a day. I think we covered about 190 kilometers on that 4 days. We added a few extra bits in. But yeah, it was completely different 6 weeks later, linking it together in one push. I have to say, I just had going around in my head on a loop, this is madness, this is madness, this is madness. But at the same time, I was so determined I was going to do it. Barring a major injury that would force me to drop out, I just knew I was going to get round. But it was really tough. So it was interesting on the pacing. The 4 days I did far quicker, because I had the benefit of that rest, food, and sleep in between. It just gets to a point, I think, when you are going up and down mountains on that sort of terrain through 2 nights, when with all the will in the world, you just can't go much faster than your body's allowing you to go. I certainly had hallucinations the second morning as I was coming up towards the last climb up to Flégère. People say that happens, you see things coming out of rocks and things that just aren't there, you're seeing. And I had to have a word with myself and just get myself back into reality to sort of get back into the moment and what I was doing.
Wow, that's amazing. So when you did the 4 days, did I hear you say you kind of kept track of your moving time?
Yeah, so I did everything on my Garmin, and we timed it as if it was the race, but in 4 segments. And actually, when I came to do the race, my husband, David, he loves spreadsheets. So he had reduced everything into this amazing spreadsheet, which was actually in 4 segments. And he was there on the route to support me throughout. You're allowed one person to basically be at different checkpoints. Okay. There are only about 4 or 5 where you're allowed to have someone, but they can give you food and different clothes and things like that. So he was always giving me the new spreadsheets, that we'd laminated for me to look at. And I kind of joke, I think in nearly 17 years of marriage, that's probably the most compliant I've ever been, because I just tried to stick to the plan and what he'd said. One of the challenges is you're so tempted to take a long rest at these checkpoints, and they even have beds available and masseurs and, medical staff and things. And I just had to try and keep to the plan and not rest too long. And that's hard. That's hard when you're feeling tired and cold or hot, or, you just want to lie down, really.
Yeah, man, it's awesome. So, I think for me, like as I said, I don't know that I'll ever attempt to go around as fast as you did, but I would really love to do the extended. And for me, I feel like the idea of that trip, there's a physical element, there's an emotional element, there's a mental element, there's even a spiritual element to just being in the beauty of nature like that. I'm curious for you, doing this in 40 hours and in your experience, like if you could just kind of quickly, I don't know, maybe even hit kind of like a highlight for each one of those, like mental, physical, emotional, like spiritual. I'm just kind of curious, like what was going on for you as you kind of traversed the Mont Blanc Massif?
Okay. So was your first one mental?
Yeah, let's go mental.
Okay, let's go mental. So I think in terms of mental challenge, the hardest part was the second night. There were 3 big climbs. So each of these major climbs are about 1,000 meters each. And I could just see these head torches snaking up the mountain, and they just seemed to keep going and going. And it was a really steep climb, one I'd obviously done before as part of this 4-day trip, but I'd done it during the day, relatively fresh. And I just got onto this one and I thought, oh my goodness, this is insane. And I got really frustrated because at each turn I thought we'd be at the summit, and then it just seemed to extend, and I could see more of these head torches and going up and up. And actually I saw one head torch really high up, and I thought, surely that's not the summit, it can't be that high. And this head torch wasn't moving. And then I figured out it was actually a star up in the sky. So I was very relieved I didn't have to go quite that high. But that was also possibly, the sleep deprivation kicking in as well. So in terms of the mental challenge, I'd say that could have been the lowest point, because I really was finding it tough at that point. In terms of physical,
I just have to reflect real quick though, because the low point was actually the high point. It sounds like.
That's a good point. That's a good way to put it. Yeah, I love that. I mean, after the event, it is possible to look at these things in a different light. And you could say it was a high point, but in that moment, it was definitely a low point.
Yeah. Okay. Emotional, you were starting to go to.
Oh, so emotional, definitely crossing the line with my 2 daughters and my 2 nieces who'd come over from the UK to come and support me. And it was just such a moment. I get quite emotional even thinking about it, because, as I say, we just sprinted over the line, and there's this amazing MC who is sort of commentating on everyone coming in, and I had loads of people there to support me because obviously I live nearby, so many people came out. But on top of that, so many people either in the UK, in the States, in America, in elsewhere in Europe. It was just amazing, the support I was getting virtually, and they were all able to watch it because it was televised. So it was just this wonderful moment. And the MC coined me the flying mama of the UTMB, which was a great quip. And it also made the official highlights video. So, we're captured forever now in that video, which is brilliant. So that was a lovely moment.
Yes, I love this. Okay, the physical element.
So physical, I'd say the first night was tough because we went to the highest elevation, around 2,600 meters a few times. And it was very, very cold up on those mountains that first night. And I think I definitely got a headache. I could see people vomiting, from the altitude, people just lying down and already going to sleep because they just wanted to take a break. And I think physically, yeah, I felt that felt tough in terms of the lungs, the legs, and also the head hurting.
Yeah, that's so interesting. So really the effects of the altitude were the
Mm.
biggest challenge physically for you.
I think so. And I'm acclimatized to it being here. So I was very, very lucky. It was interesting. I was talking to an Australian guy much later in the race on the second night, and he was saying the first night was really horrendous for him because he lives in Melbourne. He's at sea level and he can only train on a mountain, I think 1,000 meters high, which is about an hour and a half from his house. So he just was running laps on that, which obviously didn't replicate the altitude. I am living at 1,000 meters anyway here, so that was much, much, easier, I guess, for me. But I think it was just the sort of culmination of those things, the lungs, the legs, and the head that night, that I thought, yeah, this feels tough.
Yeah. So this just the majesty of the Alps and Mont
Mm.
Blanc and just being in nature, the mountains. Was there a spiritual element to this trip for you to this race?
Yeah, I feel hugely lucky and privileged to live here, and to loop that together in a way that not many people get to do was just so special. And I did actually stop to take photos. I mean, bearing in mind, I'd done this
Yeah.
over 4 days, only a few weeks before. I've done segments of the route many times. But still, I just got my phone out and took photos because it was just so beautiful. To see certain parts of it at dawn or at sunset. We were lucky it was very dry. It was very hot, but it was very dry, but it made the views just spectacular. So yeah, I definitely felt the majesty of the mountains and just privileged to be there.
Yeah, one of the words I love to talk about on this podcast is awe. And my favorite definition is a reverential respect mixed with fear and wonder. And I
Mm.
just love that feeling of awe. And I have to imagine when you're running through that area, that region, that you had to have moments of awe. And I'm just curious if any kind of jump out at you.
Yeah, I think the second day actually, on the Italian side, going up to Refuge Bonatti, and you've got the Italian side of Mont Blanc in all its majesty, staring at you. And it's quite a different side to the aspect I'm used to seeing from the French side. And the weather was just, it was hot, but it was beautiful. Everything seemed to be in glorious technicolor. And I just thought, wow, this is awe-inspiring.
Yeah. Does you're going through like physical pain, like suffer. I mean, it's hard, right? And the
Mm.
mental, like the does the majesty of the mountains sort of distract from some of that and make it easier or
I wish I could say yes, but you know what? I found, and I really thought others were finding this, we were all in our own bubbles. It was head down. There were many mountain climbs where I just was staring at the person, if there was someone near me, their feet, and trying to keep on their heel and not lose them. And so a lot of it is head down
yeah,
and you're just getting through it. Um, and I would say in terms of distraction for me, music was amazing. I had a 42-hour playlist of all my banging tunes from my youth right up to present day. And those were my main sources of distraction. So yeah, I wish I could say it was the mountains,
yeah.
but for me, yeah, I had my head down for a lot of it and I was listening to my music to distract me.
How cool though. You had a 42-hour playlist and you didn't need it all.
Yeah, that was lucky. And I
That's
actually only put
beautiful.
it on 5 hours in because the crowds were so amazing,
Mm,
coming out of Chamonix and then through Saint-Gervais where I live, which just, everyone was out and cheering and all the way up to Les Contamines. So, yeah, I didn't need it at all the first 5 hours. It was great.
yeah. So listen, we talk about awe
Mm.
and there's an awe moment that's about to happen for listeners when I tell them that you've only been running for 3 years. Like, how does that happen? Can you tell us about your running journey over the last 3 years and how you go from starting running 3 years ago to doing the UTMB?
Yeah, sure. So I should say that I started trail running probably 4 years ago with the local
Okay.
trail running club. And I went out not every, but, regularish Sundays. We'd go out and discover some trails. And I remember the first one I did thinking, oh my goodness, this is horrendous. And then it was very normalized within the club to do local trail races. And actually quite a few of the members of the club were older than me. So although I was already in my mid-40s, it didn't seem extraordinary to enter a trail race. And so 3 years ago, I did my first trail races. And it also seemed quite normal to jump up in terms of the distance. So to, go from 20 kilometers to a marathon distance in the trails with a lot of elevation. And then I think I went to 75 kilometers, and then I went to 110 kilometers. And by virtue of that handful of races, I had enough points to then go off to Switzerland a year ago and do a UTMB qualifying race, which was, I think, 55 kilometers and about 3,000 meters of elevation. So I entered the ballot. It's very oversubscribed, the UTMB, but I found out in January that I'd got a place. And I do wonder whether, for once, being a woman of a certain age was worked in my favor, because I think the algorithms maybe, have worked in such a way that I was allocated a place that perhaps many 20 to 30-year-old males didn't get, because it was so oversubscribed in their categories. So yeah, I felt lucky to get a place, and it just kind of crept. So that's how I've ended up moving from where I started to where I am now. It's not normal, I don't think, to do it, but I am quite a kind of extreme all-in person. If I'm doing something, I'm doing it. And I thought, well, I'm not going to do any of the shorter races in this UTMB series. I'm going to do the long one if I can. So yeah, that was my choice.
Well, it was a very consistent leveling up from the beginning, trying something, succeeding, leveling that up, and then continuing until now here we are. We're going to allude to this a little bit later, but I think you're just getting warmed up. I'm excited to see what happens next. But the thing is that you and I had a chance to talk last week before, obviously before we're recording here, and I've learned so much about you. And from the outside, it seems like your running journey is this very short amount of growth in a very compressed time frame. But the truth of the matter is, you've been exploring and pushing limits and, again, working hard and playing hard for your entire life. And a lot of this has come down for you. It's come down to this growing confidence inside of you. And I guess I wonder if we could kind of go there a little bit and talk about how you developed this confidence, and maybe we can kind of go back in time a little bit and you can share with listeners a little bit of your story and how that confidence is developed.
Yeah. Okay, sure. So I should say I was never a particularly confident person. I didn't have much self-belief. In fact, I'm your classic kind of type A, high achieving, very anxious to get things right, paranoid that I'm going to get things wrong, fair bout of imposter syndrome thrown in over the years. So I'm not your classic confident person. But I would say that around the sort of mid-90s, by the time I'd gone to university, I was studying law. It was, again, very normalized to go traveling in the long summer break between terms. And I think the first year I traveled around Greece with just a backpack and a sleeping bag with my friend. We had a great time. The following year, I traveled around Spain. And then it was really the third year that I discovered Southeast Asia. And that felt like a really big step for me to go and fly long haul I flew into Kuala Lumpur. I was on my own. I knew I was going on my own for a month. I think I just broken up with my boyfriend at the time, and I just knew I would have to go on my own. And it really helped me grow, because I had to take charge of myself. I had to take charge of everything I was doing, be responsible, and also just make choices, because suddenly I had this month, and I had my Lonely Planet guide with me, the hard copy. I can't believe we used to travel that way, but obviously this is before phones and things like that. And it was just this sort of voyage of, it sounds trite to say, a voyage of discovery, but it really was wonderful to take buses, up through Peninsula Malaysia. I went and did my PADI open water diving course on the Perhentian Islands. I traveled through the, tea plantations, and then down to the beaches on the East Coast. And I just had this most amazing time, very simple, living on a few dollars a day, but meeting very interesting people. And I felt quite safe. And, I thought, this is great. This is a wonderful way to live. And I actually met a friend now who lives in Australia, but she's Scottish, Laura. We met in a place called Cherating in Malaysia that summer. And we just got on immediately. And we agreed that the following year we would do a trip, starting together at least, in South America. And so I went back to do law school. She went back to finish her law degree. And I saved some money before I went. I worked at a law firm in London and saved some money. And I agreed with my law firm that I would take a year off before starting as a trainee solicitor in the city. And Laura and I met in Buenos Aires. It was about September, I think. And we learnt Spanish for a month in Buenos Aires. And then we saw this ad to crew on a sailing boat to try and go around Cape Horn. And neither of us had ever sailed. We didn't have a clue what we were doing, but I think we egged each other on. And I remember us writing emails to our respective mums from an internet cafe in Buenos Aires, trying to frame this as quite a sort of sensible cruise that we were going on. But in fact, it was to crew on a boat to try and get round Cape Horn with this captain called Marco from Italy and a few other crew, most of whom got so seasick they had to be sailed back to land to cease being on the boat. And it was a crazy month. We didn't make it round Cape Horn. The mainsail completely ripped, and we had to get ourselves to land in this very dilapidated fishing village somewhere sort of on the coast of Argentina, but a bit further south of the Falkland Isles, if you can imagine that. And it was kind of mad. We then started hitchhiking around South America. Now, as the mother of two daughters, if my girls in a few years were to say they were going to do that, I just would never sleep. I don't think again, I'd be racked with worry. But I've listened to the podcast you recorded with Daniel about hitchhiking around the world, and I just share so many of his sentiments. I had only good experiences. People were so generous, so friendly and kind. Nothing bad ever happened, even in South America. But yeah, I carried on my trip through from Brazil to the Atacama Desert in Chile and into Bolivia, and then did the Inca Trail in Peru and flew out of Lima. Laura had already done most of that sort of route, so she carried on through Central America, whilst I then flew back to London and then travelled around the world on a ticket that took me to New Zealand, where I also hitchhiked and have made lifelong friends, Australia, and then I had 3 months in China, and finished in Southeast Asia at the end, which was amazing. So that was I think it was Laos, Cambodia and Thailand. And I'd also been to quite a few of the islands east of Bali and Indonesia as well on that trip.
Yeah. It's actually, as we're kind of talking and you share the whole journey with UTMB, and you just shared the year that you had kind of traveling the world. And I know that there are other experiences that you've had increasingly throughout your life where you've taken other sort of sabbaticals to go to travel. And it's just funny because like as I kind of look at the UTMB experience, you started trail running 4 years ago. You did 20 kilometers, then 75 kilometers, and it just kept growing and growing and growing. But if I look at your adventure experiences, it's kind of the same thing. You started with a couple of little backpacking trips, and then, you travel for a week or 2 or 3, and then it turned into, and on the next thing you know, it's a year. And it's just sort of this like leveling up. Can you talk about the confidence building, both of those experiences, all of your experiences, how that confidence sort of had ratcheted up during those experiences?
Well, I think when we all step out of our zones of familiarity, and that can be in many different aspects of our lives. It can be in our work, it can be in our private life, sports, it can be many different, ways. But when we do that, we grow and we risk failure. And there is an element of risk and danger in stepping into the unknown. But I think it really is the only way we can truly grow. And I guess, as with UTMB, with the traveling, as you really eloquently summarized, I did start small, and it didn't seem like these huge step changes at the time, because actually it was the same principle of traveling. It was just, more exotic and further away from home, and in a culture I had, no experience of and no chance of speaking the language. So at each turn, yes, there was, an added degree of challenge. But I think because things went well, and there may be an element of luck in that, that made me feel more confident about taking the next step. So I suppose in terms of the traveling I've done since, my husband and I decided after we got married in 2007 that we'd love to spend a year traveling, and we were both working at the same law firm in London at the time. And I guess it started as a bit of a pipe dream. Wouldn't it be wonderful to take a whole year off and just have this luxury to travel the whole world together? And we wanted to do this north to south, which was Alaska down to Ushuaia and Patagonia overland. And then we wanted to travel around the world like a proper circumnavigation, going all the way through Europe, Russia to China, and then Japan, and then on to New Zealand, Australia, and all across the States. And we thought, well, why not? Why shouldn't we do it? So we actually spoke to our law firm. We said, we're going to have to resign. They said, no, actually, we'll hold the your job's open for you, which was extremely nice of them. And yeah, we saved our money and we made our plans. We didn't plan too much. We planned our flights, but beyond that, we just had a small tent and our rucksacks. We picked up some extra rock climbing stuff. We were doing quite a bit of rock climbing by that point. That's my husband's real passion. And so we did a lot of rock climbing around New Zealand, Australia, and the States. But yeah, we hadn't, it was a simple life. It was a very, very simple life. We were living out of a tent or the back of a truck most of that year. And yet it was probably, we would say, the best year of our lives, probably. And I guess in terms of stepping stones, to have done that together and shared that together, I think that really changed us both and our outlook on life and what we wanted from it. But it was funny, we went straight back to London after that year and just stepped back into our corporate lives and our London lives for about 4 years. And then the opportunity came up to go across to Hong Kong, to the Hong Kong office of our law firm with David's job. The only problem was we had just had our second daughter. So she was 3 months old when we moved. Lara, our eldest, was 2.5. And we didn't know anyone really in Hong Kong. We had just finished renovating our house. So everything was perfect. And yet this was this opportunity to go. And we just thought, why not? I can remember thinking, well, I've done one maternity leave in London with Lara. Why don't I try maternity leave in Hong Kong and see how that is with Ilya? And so we arrived with a newborn and a 2.5-year-old, and we were suddenly living in the 27th floor of a high rise in Hong Kong, you know, a city state with 7 million people. But it was amazing. We had an amazing time. I was able to find work in the office there, and my career really flourished there, as did David's, and it was an amazing 6 years. But then, just as things were probably on paper looking very comfortable, the girls were thriving. They were in a school learning Mandarin, English, and Spanish at the time. They had loads of activities they loved. But we just bought this little place in the Alps, which was a lucky purchase, shall we say. And we thought we owe it to our kids and to ourselves to see whether we can make this work. So we actually then did resign from the law firm after, I think, 19 years. We've both been there. And we moved over to France. And that's where we are now, 5 years later. But we had no real idea of where work would come from or what life would be like. But we thought we need to give it a go. And we registered our girls at the local French school. They didn't have a word of French at that point. And we just dropped them off at the school and hoped for the best. And actually, they picked up the French really, really quickly. I remember them saying, "Mummy, it's so much easier than Mandarin. It's so much easier than Chinese." So I think there was something as well intrinsic around, I think, them being exposed to different languages from a very early age in Asia. I think that helped them, although the French language was very different to Chinese. They picked it up quickly, and yeah, it was good.
Anita, I'm just, as I'm sitting here listening to you, I'm kind of reflecting in my own mind. You seem like you and your whole family, you and your husband, you guys seem like you are just wide open and ready to embrace opportunities that come your way and saying yes to them. And it seems like it almost seems like that the confidence thing is like this snowball. It seems like you embrace the opportunity, you trust that you're going to figure it out. And then when you do, the confidence grows, and it just seems like it's continuing to grow. And that's such an amazing thing. I wonder, like in the beginning, when this, I'm going to call it the confidence snowball, like was just a little pebble, like what was that like? Was there a time when the confidence wasn't there and there was fear and there was doubt? And I'm curious about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And there still is. I mean, you know, I still doubt sometimes what I'm doing. I took the decision recently to step back from my legal work to launch my business as an executive coach, which I have retrained as. And yeah, there is risk attached to that. And, you know, there are moments when I lack confidence in, you know, whether that has been the right choice. But what I do know is without trying, I won't even know. And I feel that I have to back myself. And so I guess if we go back in time to those sort of earlier versions of me, I think it was incremental. You know, you do something and it works, and that could be doing a, you know, stretch project at work and it going well, and, you know, everyone giving you a pat on the back. But from that, you gain confidence, and then you move on to the next thing. And I just feel I've often had to draw on past experiences that are unrelated entirely to the present challenge in hand. You know, I kid you not, you know, I when I was looking at doing UTMB, I did at times say to myself, well, I was pretty good at endurance, you know, back in the day, the work hard, play hard. I'd pull an all-nighter at work, you know, to meet a deadline, and then somehow managed to go out, you know, the next night to celebrate. So, you know, 2 nights, you know, no sleep. And those sound like really tenuous, you know, experiences to draw on. But I think we all have a bank of experience we can draw on. We just have to take a moment to think and reflect on those. And, you know, I would just encourage everyone to allow yourself the luxury to think about what you have achieved in your life. And it doesn't have to be some major big thing. You know, I often cite the driving example. You know, most of us have all learned to drive. And when you actually think about driving, it's really high risk and really difficult. You know, I know we drive in the UK with manual sticks, and yes, it might be a bit more complicated. But still, even in the US, I think, you know, I've just seen my nephew at 15 pass his test. It's incredible. And, you know, when you think every adult really learns to do that, I think draw on these little experiences, allow yourself to think about what you've done in other aspects of your life, and allow yourself to, you know, have confidence to use those experiences to take you forward into different aspects of life or different challenges.
Yeah, and you know, you just mentioned again like the whole work hard, play hard, and you
Mm,
really have embraced that. And I think it's, you know, I think another thing that's just so interesting to me is, you know, you have people that are really committed to their career. A lot of what we've been focusing on here is adventure, but you know, we didn't
mm,
even get into the career side, but you've seemed
mm,
to have this really beautiful balance of, you know, in the intro, the glitzy corporate life of being a corporate attorney, London, Paris, Hong Kong, like this is big time stuff, but yet you're also such an incredible adventurer that appreciates the simplicity of sleeping in a tent and, you know, hiking with a backpack. Like,
mm.
how do you blend those two? How have you been able to do that?
Well, I think in terms of the career, because I was, you know, labeled the studious one, my brother was the sporty one, and I guess we lived up to those titles, if you like. Going into law seemed like a very natural thing for me to do. Also, I was attracted to going to the city, you know, living in London and being there. And that certainly, you know, was great for me in my 20s. Moving up into my 30s, I think I felt I'm not sure this is the career for me or the place for me, really, as I look to sort of raise a family. Um, but I just I did enjoy the job, and I think I liked that it allowed me to travel and experience new, you know, cultures, like moving to Asia and really experiencing what it would be like to live there for 6 years. So it's given me so much. But actually, the move we took from Hong Kong to France, I think we really knew that was a big move. That was something where we were, for a moment at least, closing that door on that corporate life. And we actually moved here, and my husband and I, you know, we didn't work as such for, I think it was 2 years. Now, during that time, there was the pandemic. So I think everybody in their own way lived a simpler life and were probably working less. And so that was a bit of a leveler, but still, we we had a really big sea change in how we lived our lives. We'd suddenly brought back all this time to be with our children, which was so important to us. And just that time to really think about, well, who do we want to be? What do we want to spend our, you know, precious time, you know, doing? How do we want to live? Now, I have to say, I think the pandemic really helped us. You know, we were able to then start working remotely. I actually then went and worked remotely for my old law firm for 2 years on a really major dispute and public inquiry, and I did that all from here, which was an amazing opportunity. But, you know, we weren't to know at the point of moving and taking that risk to, you know, move over here, that that would become possible. Likewise with the executive coaching, now it's very normal to coach remotely and do video
Right, for
consultations.
sure.
So that has become more possible. We weren't to know that that was going to happen, but I guess we've benefited from that. I am sure, though, that if that hadn't happened, absent that, I think we would have found a way to make it work. Perhaps I would have got a job locally, and, you know, that would have had its benefits as well, because although I've tried very much to integrate here, we all have, and, you know, we do voluntary work here to really integrate and use our French. I think you cannot substitute working actually and being immersed in, you know, a French day to day, and that's really through your work. So I think there would have been benefits had we not been able to work remotely, and I think we would have tried to seek out those advantages of that. So I think it's about trying to take chances, see opportunities, and not worry too much about the details, try, by all means, you've got to have a plan. I'm a firm believer that if you're going to have a big goal and go after it, you need to have 4 things. And that's an element of self-belief, not much, but enough. You need to have sufficient time to realize that goal, and that can involve some difficult choices and, sacrifices. And then you need to have a plan. And you need to execute on that plan. And finally, you need to have support. So those are my 4 ingredients, if you like, for going after big goals and big change. But I think we've taken chances and taken risks for sure. But so far they've paid off.
Yeah, I love those 4: belief, time, plan, and support.
Yeah, that's great. That's even better. 4 words. I like that.
I loved that. I think one thing that I notice about you, I mean, there have been key points in your life where you have acknowledged this voice inside that's calling you to some sort of adventure. It was, after law school, your law firm held a place for you, but it seems like you essentially said, I'm doing this. And, they saw your value and said, okay, we'll wait. And then later in your career, same thing, you were ready to resign, and the firm that you were working for said, we'll hold your place. And so it's like, you've been so passionately connected to the voice inside that's called you to adventure, and you've been intentional about saying yes. And obviously that confidence snowball keeps occurring for you. I'm curious because, you've kind of drawn a hard line in some of those places to say, like, I'm going to do this because this is something that my heart is calling me to do. And there has to have been this trust that everything was going to work out. And I'm curious if confidence and trust are the same thing, or if they're different, that trusting that everything's going to work out.
Well, I think one begets the other. So if you have sufficient confidence, you can have an element of trust that you're going to, succeed. But I think often it depends as well on external factors. And you're quite right to say we have, oftentimes taken charge of the direction of our careers and our lives as a result. And we've gone to the firm to say, we want to do this, we want to do that. And, I do think, if you don't ask, you're not going to get. So it's worth having the discussion.
Totally.
And I would encourage people to listen to, and think about what their inner voice is saying and how they might be able to turn that into a conversation with whoever it needs to be, whether that is your boss or whether that's your partner or a friend or a child, or, but I think it is really important to take that time to reflect on, what it is you want to do in your life and who you want to, spend that doing, because ultimately we're the sum total of the people in our lives. And, we do need to be doing what brings us joy. That's the bottom line. So it's worth taking a moment to think about that, and then imagining, what does that involve? What does that look like to get from where I am now to where I might want to be? And yes, that will involve potentially difficult conversations with stakeholders. But, I would encourage people to have those conversations.
I love it. Can you talk a little bit about your earliest inspiration and the earliest call to adventure that you felt?
Well, it's interesting. I feel I've joined the dots recently. My paternal grandmother recently passed away. She was 100 years old. She'd received her card from the King and Queen, which if you turn 100 in the UK, you receive, it used to be a telegram, now it's a beautiful card. But she reached 100 and she sadly passed away a couple of months after that. But learning now much more about her life in the various obituaries and things that have been written about her, and being at her funeral, I feel like she was just so adventurous. And this is back in the 20s and 30s. She went over she was born in Belgium, and she went to France at 14 to become a nanny. She then got married on a hunch based on a New Year's Eve kiss with my grandfather in Belgium in the middle of the war. And she moved over on a hunch to the UK, not speaking English, and she married him and she made her life over there. And she still then continued to travel back to Belgium with the 3 children and see family. And she loved adventure. I've got some amazing old black and white photos of her, sort of clambering up rocks and, in exotic places doing fun things. And I just wonder whether actually there's something right deep in my past from her that has helped shape me into the person I am. In terms of youngest memories that I can personally remember, I do recall always feeling cold growing up in the UK, and I never moved. This was my error. I've learned since that, I can live in a ski resort now, and as long as I get out moving, running or skiing, and wear the right clothes, I'll stay warm. And I don't think I did any of those things when I was young. So I do remember always feeling cold and wanting to sort of be somewhere warm. And I remember when we were 8, we went on a holiday to Spain for the first time, and my mum loves, warmth and, exotic places and palm trees. I think we both love, share a love of palm trees. But I do remember that, just stepping off the plane and just feeling this warmth hitting me and thinking, oh, this is nice. And then, in the evenings, it's very typical in Spain to, for families to go out and eat very late. They've all had a siesta and, everyone's out late and eating al fresco. And it was just it seemed so impossibly exotic to me. And I do think I always hankered after going somewhere warm and exotic based on those early experiences.
I love this metaphor so much because this confidence has been building. It all started with Anita feeling cold, and so your whole life you've been warming up.
Yeah, I like that. That's another good one. Yeah, maybe. I might have reached peak temperature, I think. I'm not sure.
I don't know. I think you're just getting started. You're warmed up. I mean, Tour du Mont-Blanc, it's cold out there, but you said it yourself. If you just keep moving, you'll stay warm.
No, it's true. It's true. I remember, this is really embarrassing. I can remember I used to come home from school and we had a sofa and behind it was a radiator. And I used to lie sort of across the sofa onto the radiator and just lie still and watch the television and sort of stay still and stay warm. And I was thinking, now I look back, I think, why did I do that? Why didn't I just go outside and kick a ball around or do something physical? And, I would have been warmer than I would have been lying on this radiator. But that was me. I was, yeah.
I love it. But now, Anita, can you tell a little bit about what you're doing now and how people can connect with you and get involved with the work that you're doing today?
Yeah, thank you. So as I mentioned, I've clicked pause on my legal work for now, and I did my diploma in executive coaching earlier this year, and I'm now building up my coaching practice. So I work with clients in different industries, and I also do life coaching, so business coaching and life coaching. I do that all remotely. Sometimes I'm in London or Geneva, but generally I'm doing it remotely. So I'm always keen to connect with people. So if anyone's found this interesting or got further questions, you can find me on LinkedIn, and I'm happy for people to contact me as well by email. So I'm happy for you to put our website address into the show notes.
Awesome. We'll do that. I'm a big fan of, getting inspiration from people that walk the talk, and you're like this, you work hard. You've been very successful in your career, but you're also very successful in your adventure life. And like you're somebody that I admire. And I think you're, the opportunity for people to get coaching from you is incredible because you're somebody that's actually living the stuff. And so I just think that's so cool. I really appreciate that. And I think with that, if we could share maybe some lessons with folks that are listening that are inspired by your confidence, and maybe people that want your confidence but haven't figured out how to get there yet. Do you have any advice that you want to leave people with?
Mm-hmm. Well, I would say, number one, don't be hard on yourself. Allow yourself that luxury of time to reflect on what it is you want to do. Draw on, as I said, that bank of experience. Be creative in thinking about what is it you've done before that might allow you to, have the confidence to take this next step. It could be in a completely different sphere. As I say, for UTMB, I didn't have much trail running experience to draw on, so I had to look elsewhere to other times when I've pushed myself. So I would say, allow yourself to think about what it is that you want to do, and then allow yourself also some time to reflect on things you've done in the past, experiences, work, in life, relationships. We've all got this bank of experience, but we don't often tap into it or allow ourselves to tap into it because we fear that might feel arrogant or boastful or something like that. And I think just, allow yourself that time and see where it might take you. Take a chance. That would be my advice.
Thank you so much. You have lived this epic life, traveling all over the world, top 10 finisher for your age group in the UTMB. I mean, just so many stories. And I just know that at some point Hollywood is going to pick up on this and they're going to want to make a movie about your life. And
I don't think so.
Oh yeah, I'm sure of it. Anita, when they do, who's going to be the Hollywood actress that's going to play you in your movie?
Well, I knew this question was coming. So we had an interesting discussion over dinner yesterday, and Lara, my 13-year-old, said Claire Danes, which I thought had some really nice symmetry to it, because
that's great.
I guess she's reinvented herself. I guess I've reinvented myself at a few turns in my life, and she has as an actress. So yeah, I liked that. And it made me laugh. My younger daughter, Ilya, we got a photo up of her and she said, well, your hair's a bit different, but she's got more wrinkles than you. And I thought, I love that. If only I looked like Claire Danes, I would be delighted. So I think my daughter Ilya had some rose tinted spectacles on there when she was looking at that.
I like that choice, Claire Danes. And what's your movie going to be called?
Well, David had this suggestion, and I think this is a good one. Why not me? And I think oftentimes I've sort of asked, well, why not me? Someone's going to do this, and why shouldn't it be me? Why shouldn't I be able to travel around the world? Why shouldn't I be able to balance, a legal career with, this sort of simple life in the Alps? Why shouldn't I do UTMB? Someone's got to do it. And I guess that sort of process of reinvention, which comes from confidence, to your point. But I think, the why not me? I wrote a LinkedIn post as well about it a couple of days ago. So there's something on there about why not me. But I think that would be a good title to the film.
Why Not Me, starring Claire Danes. That's going to be good.
Perfect.
I'm super excited. Anita, I'm so thankful that you spent some time with me today. And I want to give a public shout out to our mutual friend, Brad Knoll, host of the Student of the Game podcast, for connecting us. So honored to have been able to spend some time with you today. And for those listening, I hope you've been inspired today as much as I have. I hope Anita's story has encouraged you to listen to the voice inside that calls you to adventure, because we want to hear your story next. If you have a story to tell or just need a nudge to create one, please send me an email. We'd also appreciate it if you'd help us spread the word by leaving a review and sharing or tagging Inspire Campfire in your social media. And until next time, I want to encourage you to get outside. Thanks for listening. Anita, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It was a pleasure.